Every trader fantasizes about that turning point, the day the noise on the chart suddenly becomes clear structure, the moment you stop wrestling with the market and start moving in rhythm with it. But what most traders never get told is this. Before that shift happens, there is an in-between zone every winning trader must walk through. It's not in the courses. It's not in the hype videos. Nobody shows it on Instagram. It is the quiet stretch between I understand the theory and I can actually live it. The long gray corridor where your results don't match your knowledge and everything feels off. At the beginning, trading feels electric. You binge videos on candlesticks, market structure, order flow, risk-reward, psychology. You picture yourself catching clean moves, stacking green days, buying back your time and calling yourself a full-time trader. Then you go live. Now the chart isn't just candles and levels anymore. It's your money, your ego, your hopes, and your fears. Suddenly every tick feels personal. You hesitate when you should execute. You jump in when you should wait. You close early, you hold too long, you move stops, you widen targets. It's not that you don't know what the right decision is. It's that in real time with real money, you can't bring yourself to do it over and over again. That's the invisible phase, the emotional canyon between knowing and doing. In this chapter of your journey, you're aware of how good you could be, but you haven't yet built the emotional backbone to show up as that trader consistently. Most people mislabel this phase. They call it failure. They assume it means, I'm not built for this. In reality, this is where every consistent trader is forged. This middle stretch hurts. You'll execute what you believe is an A+ setup and still get stopped out. You'll nail the analysis, exit too early from fear, and then sit there watching price run exactly where you thought it would. You'll slam your desk, question your intelligence, and wonder whether all of this is a gigantic waste of time. Your mind will start throwing solutions at you. Maybe I need a new indicator. Maybe I need a different mentor. Maybe this strategy is trash. Maybe trading just isn't my thing. But in truth, it's rarely your system that's being evaluated. It's you. The market isn't shutting you out. It's stretching you. This phase is where your emotional tolerance is pulled to its limits. The charts expose every crack in your mindset. Impatience, greed, ego, fear, the need to be right, the urge to control everything. And as brutal as it feels, that exposure has a purpose. The trader who can handle significant size and consistent returns in the future cannot be built on top of those old habits. They have to be burned out of you. The profitable version of you doesn't exist yet. This phase is where that version is being assembled. Most traders can't stand this chapter because the rewards are not obvious. You don't see the progress in your equity curve. You don't get a medal for doing the right thing. You can follow your rules perfectly and still end the day red, while the reckless guy on Twitter flips an account with one lucky gamble. That disconnect between I did things correctly and I still lost is a psychological trap. When logic and results don't seem aligned, people lose faith. They conclude, what's the point of discipline if randomness decides everything? That's where the majority tap out. But the small group that keeps going, the ones who walk through that fog instead of turning around, those are the traders who eventually discover genuine consistency. Because this in-between phase isn't really about dollars. It's about reactions. The market is indifferent. It doesn't care about your dreams, your backstory, or how badly you want this. It simply reveals how you behave when you don't know what will happen next. In this chapter, your real opponent isn't whipsaw price action or fake breakouts. It's your craving for certainty. You want control. You want proof that it's working. You want your P&L to validate all the hours you've put in. But trading doesn't move on your timeline. It pays out to people who can wait, not to people who try to force progress. So this process feels harsh but necessary. On the surface, it looks like you're stuck. Under the surface, an upgrade is happening. Your brain is slowly letting go of the gambler inside you, the version that needs action, needs revenge, needs to get it back right now. Bit by bit, you're replacing emotional reflexes with emotional control. Every time you refuse to jump back in after a revenge trigger, you're building patience. Every time you take the loss, log it, and don't touch your plan, you're building resilience. Every time you sit out because the setup doesn't match your rules, even though you're bored and tempted, you're strengthening discipline. You don't see these changes in your account immediately, but they're as real as any equity curve. This is the dividing line between dabblers and professionals. The dabblers keep rewriting their playbook. The pros keep rewriting themselves. The dabblers chase the next holy grail. The pros refine their behavior around the edge they already understand. The traders who survive this stage stop asking, "When will I finally start winning big?" and start asking, "How do I remain composed when I lose?" They stop trying to bend the market to their will and start learning how to regulate their own responses. At some point in this process, something subtle shifts. It's not that the market becomes kinder. You become quieter. You're no longer jumping at every tick. You're no longer obsessed with catching every candle. You can watch price move without feeling personally attacked or personally validated. That's when you know you're close to the breakthrough. Because the first real sign that your trading is maturing is not a bigger profit line. It's a calmer nervous system. When your actions are no longer dictated by fear, FOMO, or the need for excitement, you've crossed a threshold that most never reach. From there, the journey becomes less about building strategies and more about maintaining state. You start noticing that your biggest problems never came from the market structure. They came from the moments you abandoned your own structure. The times you widened stops just this once. The times you doubled size after a loss because you knew the next one would work. The times you closed early because you couldn't stand seeing floating profit fluctuate. All of that had one root: untrained emotion. The real change begins the day you stop blaming spreads, news, brokers, or systems, and accept full responsibility for how you behave in uncertainty. That realization stings. It's heavy to admit that it wasn't the strategy, the platform, or the mentor that blew the account. It was your fear, greed, and impatience. But that honesty is the doorway to the next level, because once you see it, you can work on it. You start treating every trade as a live test of your psychology. Not will this setup win, but will I stick to my rules no matter what this candle does? You stop seeing a red trade as a character judgment and start viewing it as feedback. You ask better questions. What emotion was driving that decision? What pattern shows up in my worst days? Where do I abandon my plan most often? Entries, stops, or exits? Those questions mark the beginning of emotional mastery. You realize consistency doesn't come from finding the perfect pattern. It comes from being the same person before, during, and after the trade. Your rules aren't the issue. Your ability to honor them is. So the work shifts. You start slowing everything down. You deliberately reduce size so that your brain can actually stay calm enough to learn. You journal, not just price levels, but thoughts, body sensations, and impulses. You begin to recognize your recurring sabotage patterns. The urge to trade when you're tired, bored, or angry. The tendency to add size after a win. The way you stare at P&L instead of the chart. And as this awareness deepens, your identity as a trader starts to evolve. You're no longer chasing fireworks. You crave stability. You're no longer addicted to activity. You value accuracy. You stop hunting for the perfect setup and start focusing on flawless execution of a good setup. You accept one of the hardest truths in trading. You will never control outcomes. The only thing you can ever truly control is your behavior. You cannot decide whether this trade will make money, but you can decide whether it was taken for the right reasons, with the right risk, and in alignment with your plan. Once that sinks in, your scoreboard changes. A losing trade that followed your rules becomes a success. A winning trade that broke your rules becomes a warning. This shift is what separates the emotionally driven from the consistently profitable. Your real growth stops showing up just on the statement. It shows up in how you react. You notice yourself breathing instead of panicking when price spikes against you. You stay put instead of checking your phone every 30 seconds. You don't feel compelled to fix every move. You start trusting your preparation more than your momentary feelings. That calm is the quiet reward of this stage. No one sees it from the outside. To others, you still look like just another trader at a screen. They don't see the internal battles you've already won, but you feel the difference. You're less reactive, more deliberate, less desperate. more grounded. You've built something more valuable than any single winning streak. Self-control. This whole stretch, the invisible chapter before consistent profitability, is like the winter before spring. It can feel dull, harsh, and endless, but underneath the surface something is growing. The market is not trying to humiliate you, it's pruning you, cutting away impulsiveness, ego, and insecurity so that the disciplined version of you has room to grow. That's the cost of mastery. You cannot bypass this chapter, you can only live through it. But if you do, you never look at the market the same way again. You recognize that the charts didn't suddenly become easier, you became different. The setups were always there, the patterns always repeated. The difference now is that your responses finally match the trader you wanted to be from the beginning. Your mind stops needing chaos. You don't chase every move. You wait. You choose. You execute. You accept. And that's when trading stops being a constant emotional roller coaster and becomes what it was always meant to be for you, a structured game of probabilities, played by someone who finally trusts themselves enough not to quit in the chapter where almost everyone else gives up. This was the silent chart. I'll see you in the next video.